Hey guys, congratulations. Tonight you've been selected as a concubine to the Imperial Chinese Emperor during the Ming Dynasty. It sounds glamorous until you realize you're waking up at 4 in the morning to the sound of your roommate, Precious Orchid, vomiting into a jade basin because she ate questionable fish paste yesterday, and the smell is a delightful blend of fermented soybeans and stomach acid that's now permanently embedded in the silk curtains around your bed. Your sleeping quarters are exquisite, of course. Lacquered red pillars carved with dragons, mother-of-pearl screens that catch the early morning light, and delicate porcelain that costs more than most people see in a lifetime. And there's also a peacock named Commander Strut, who has decided your particular corner of the concubine quarters is his personal territory. And he's been systematically destroying your belongings since you arrived 3 months ago. But we'll get to why that bird is about to make your morning routine a special kind of nightmare. You roll over on your sleeping mat, which is stuffed with what they promised was the finest silk batting, but feels suspiciously like it's been packed with hair. Not clean hair. Hair that's been saved from various sources and crammed into fabric, creating a lumpy, slightly damp surface that makes your skin itch in places you cannotly scratched paw while maintaining imperial dignity. The wake-up bell hasn't even rung yet, but you're already awake because Precious Orchid's digestive situation has been ongoing for about an hour, and the sound echoes off the walls in a way that suggests whoever designed these quarters thought about acoustics, but didn't consider that 12 women sharing a space might have bodily functions. The architecture amplifies everything. Every stomach gurgle, every joint crack, every whispered complaint about the food or the emperor, or the fact that the chamber pots haven't been emptied properly in 2 days. You sit up and immediately regret it because your back feels like you've been sleeping on a pile of decorative stones, which, given the quality of your mattress, isn't entirely inaccurate. Your silk sleeping robe clings to your skin in that particular way that happens when you've been sweating through expensive fabric, and now you smell faintly of nervous perspiration. Mixed with the jasmine oil, they rub into everyone's hair before bed. It's supposed to be soothing, but when combined with fierce sweat and whatever that peacock has been doing to mark his territory, it creates a bouquet that would make a palace gardener weep. Commander Strut chooses this moment to announce his presence by strutting directly over your feet with his enormous claws, each step deliberate and somehow personally insulting. His feathers brush against your legs as he passes, and you can feel the tiny mites that live in his plumage transferring to your skin. Peacocks, it turns out, are walking ecosystems of parasites, but no one mentions this when they're describing the beauty and majesty of imperial pets. The morning routine is about to begin, which means you need to get up and present yourself as a vision of imperial femininity, despite feeling like you've been trampled by the emperor's horse collection. Your first task is to report to the washing area, where you'll discover that the water isn't exactly fresh, and the soap has the consistency of cold lard mixed with sand. But first, you need to survive getting dressed. Your daily robes hang on a wooden stand that Commander Strut has apparently been using as a scratching post, because there are small tears in the silk where his claws have caught the fabric. The colors are still magnificent, deep blues and greens with gold thread that catches the light. But when you lift the robe to examine it, you can smell that distinctive peacock musk that seems to permeate everything in this room. It's not quite bird droppings, not quite wet feathers, but something in between that makes your nose wrinkle and your throat close slightly. You slip the robe over your head, and immediately the fabric sticks to your slightly damp skin in all the wrong places. The sleeves are designed to drape elegantly, but they're also designed to trap heat and moisture. So within minutes, you're essentially wearing a beautiful silk sauna that makes you sweat more, which makes the fabric stick more, which makes you sweat more. It's a vicious cycle that the palace designers apparently didn't consider when they were focusing on making everyone look like floating flowers. The underthings are worse. Layers of thin silk that are supposed to create smooth lines under your outer robes. But instead, they bunch and twist and create lumps in places where lumps shouldn't exist. The binding around your chest is tight enough to create the desired silhouette, but also tight, enough to make breathing a conscious effort. And the way the fabric rubs against your skin with every movement creates a constant, low-level irritation that you're not allowed to acknowledge, let alone address. Your shoes are tiny works of art, embroidered with silver thread and pearls that must have taken months to attach by hand. They're also completely impractical for actual walking, with soles so thin you can feel every pebble and imperfection in the floor through them. The fit is deliberately snug to create the appearance of delicate feet, which means your toes are compressed into positions that would make a foot-binding enthusiast proud. Every step is a small exercise in controlled discomfort. Commander Strut has apparently decided that your dressing routine is taking too long, because he's now pecking at the hem of your robe with increasing aggression. Peacocks, you've learned, have very specific opinions about scheduling, and they're not shy about expressing displeasure when humans fail to meet their expectations. His beak is surprisingly sharp, and each peck creates tiny holes in the expensive fabric that you'll somehow have to explain to the head eunuch later. The washing area is a marble paradise that would be stunning if it weren't for the practical realities of 12 women trying to clean themselves before dawn. The water in the basins has been sitting since yesterday, and it has that stale, metallic taste that happens when water sits too long in metal containers. The soap is made from ash and animal fat, creating a gray sludge that technically removes dirt, but leaves your skin feeling raw and tight. You splash the lukewarm water on your face and immediately taste copper and something else that might be rust from the pipes. The towels are silk, naturally, but they're thin silk that doesn't actually absorb moisture so much as push it around your face. You pat your skin dry and realize you're still damp, just with more expensive dampness than before. The mirror situation is particularly depressing. Polished bronze that reflects your image with the clarity of muddy water, so you can see that something is wrong with your appearance, but not exactly what. Your skin looks gray in the bronze reflection. Your eyes appear sunken, and there's something about the way the metal distorts your features that makes you look like a tired ghost wearing expensive clothes. Precious Orchid finally emerges from her vomiting session, looking pale and shaky, which means she'll be useless for the morning activities, but will still be expected to participate with enthusiasm. She's the kind of concubine who came to the palace thinking it would be like the stories, all romantic encounters and luxurious living, and has spent the last 6 months slowly realizing that reality involves a lot more bodily functions and a lot less poetry than advertised. The breakfast situation is where things start to get truly complicated. The food is prepared by imperial chefs using the finest ingredients, but it has to travel from the kitchens to the concubine quarters, and that journey involves corridors that aren't exactly temperature controlled. By the time your meal arrives, everything that was supposed to be hot is lukewarm. Everything that was supposed to be cold is room temperature. And everything has a faint taste of whatever Commander Strut decided to investigate along the way. Your morning meal consists of delicate rice porridge that's been sitting long enough to develop a skin on top, dried fruit that's been rehydrated in water that tastes suspiciously like the washing water, and tea that's been steeped to the point where it tastes more like bark than leaves. There's also a small portion of pickled vegetables that have the texture of wet paper and a flavor that makes your eyes water. You sit on a silk cushion that's been flattened by months of use into something resembling a decorative pancake, trying to eat breakfast while maintaining the posture that's been drilled into you since arrival. Straight back, small bites, no facial expressions that might suggest you're having thoughts about the food quality. Commander Strut positions himself directly beside your eating area and begins the morning ritual of cleaning his feathers, which involves a lot of vigorous shaking that sends tiny bits of bird debris floating through the air and onto your food. The other concubines are dealing with their own morning challenges. Beautiful Moon is trying to eat around a toothache that's been bothering her for weeks, but dental care in the Imperial Palace consists mainly of hoping problems resolve themselves. Elegant Willow is attempting to hide the fact that she's broken out in some kind of rash from the new face powder they've been using, which contains lead and mercury for that coveted pale complexion, but also causes skin irritation and eventually brain damage. The head eunuch arrives to inspect the morning preparations, which means everyone has to stand and bow while he walks through the quarters looking for problems to report. He has a voice like a rusty gate and a personality to match, and he's particularly fond of pointing out minor infractions that will result in reduced meal portions or extra chores. Today he's focused on the fact that someone's sleeping area smells like bird, and he's determined to identify the culprit. Commander Strut, sensing the tension, chooses this moment to demonstrate his territorial instincts by spreading his tail feathers and making the noise that peacocks make when they want everyone to know they're displeased. It's not quite a scream, not quite a honk, but something in between. It sounds like a rusty trumpet being played by someone who's never seen a trumpet before. The sound echoes off the marble walls and wooden ceiling in a way that makes everyone's teeth ache. Your daily schedule is about to begin, which means the next 14 hours will be spent in a carefully choreographed routine of waiting, posing, and hoping the Emperor might notice you exist. But first, you need to survive the morning beauty preparations, which involve cosmetics made from ingredients that would horrify a modern chemist, and application techniques that haven't been updated since someone's great-grandmother decided that beauty required suffering. The face powder is made from rice flour mixed with lead, creating a paste that goes on smooth and white, but gradually absorbs into your skin, taking some of your natural color with it. The rouge for your cheeks comes from crushed insects mixed with wax, and it has the consistency of slightly warm butter that's been left out too long. When you apply it, it smears rather than blends, creating patches of color that look more like bruises than the intended healthy glow. Your eyebrows need to be plucked into the fashionable thin lines that suggest refinement and delicacy, but the tweezers are more like tiny torture devices that grab multiple hairs at once and pull them out in clusters. Each pluck sends a sharp pain across your forehead, and the process leaves your skin red and irritated for hours afterward. The goal is eyebrows so thin they're barely visible, which apparently suggests that you're too refined for normal human hair growth patterns. The lip color comes from vermilion mixed with animal fat, creating a paste that tastes like copper pennies and has the staying power of wet chalk. It goes on bright red but fades unevenly, leaving patches of color that make your mouth look like you've been eating berries without wiping properly. The texture is waxy and uncomfortable, and it transfers onto everything you eat or drink, which means reapplication is constant throughout the day. Your hair needs to be arranged in the style that's currently favored by the imperial court, which involves pins made from bone and metal that dig into your scalp and create pressure points that throb all day. The hair is pulled so tightly that your eyes water and your forehead feels stretched, and the elaborate arrangements require so many pins and combs that your head weighs noticeably more when you're finished. The style is held in place with a mixture of egg whites and tree resin that dries hard and makes your scalp itch constantly. Commander Strut has positioned himself where he can observe the entire beauty routine, and he's developed opinions about the process. Every time someone applies makeup, he tilts his head and makes small clicking noises that sound distinctly judgmental. When the hairstyling begins, he starts pacing back and forth while making the low rumbling sound that peacocks make when they're building up to a full display of displeasure. The jewelry comes next, which sounds luxurious until you realize that gold and jade are heavy, and wearing them for 14 hours straight leaves marks on your skin and creates pressure points that throb by evening. The earrings are particularly problematic because they're designed to hang nearly to your shoulders, creating a constant tugging sensation that makes your earlobes ache. The necklaces layer on top of each other, creating weight that pulls at your neck and makes turning your head a deliberate action. The final step in morning preparation is the inspection, where the head eunuch examines each concubine to make sure she meets imperial standards for beauty and presentation. He carries a small mirror and a critical eye, and he's not shy about pointing out flaws that need correction. Today, he's particularly focused on the fact that your rouge has smeared slightly during the beauty process, creating an asymmetrical effect that apparently suggests moral weakness. You stand still while he examines your face from various angles, making small disapproving noises and occasionally reaching out to adjust something with fingers that smell like incense and disappointment. His touch is clinical and impersonal, but somehow more invasive than if he'd been deliberately inappropriate. He's treating you like a decorative object that's not quite meeting specifications, which is probably accurate, but still unpleasant. Commander Strut chooses this moment to demonstrate his dominance by attacking a silk cushion, grabbing it with his claws and shaking it vigorously while making aggressive peacock noises. Feathers and silk threads fly through the air, creating a small storm of debris that settles on everyone's carefully prepared appearance. The head eunuch glares at the bird, but even he's not foolish enough to discipline the emperor's favorite pet. The morning inspection concludes with a lecture about proper comportment and the mort, importance of representing the imperial household with dignity, which is delivered while you're all standing in uncomfortable shoes on marble floors that are cold enough to numb your feet through the thin soles. Your back aches from holding the required posture. Your face itches from the makeup, and you can feel sweat beginning to form under the layers of silk despite the early morning chill. The day's first official activity is approaching, which means you need to move to the main courtyard, where you'll spend the next several hours, standing in formation while looking beautiful and available. The walk from the concubine quarters to the courtyard involves navigating corridors that are designed for visual impact rather than practical movement, with steps that are the wrong height for human legs and doorways that require specific maneuvering to avoid damaging your elaborate clothing. Commander Strut decides to accompany the group, which means dealing with a large bird who doesn't understand the concept of walking in formation and who has very specific opinions about the pace of movement. He alternates between rushing ahead and stopping completely to examine something that's caught his interest, usually something that shouldn't be examined by a bird with sharp claws and a beak designed for destruction. The courtyard is a masterpiece of imperial architecture, with marble columns that rise toward a sky that's painted with clouds and flying cranes, and gardens that are maintained by armies of servants who work through the night to ensure every flower is perfectly positioned. It's also completely exposed to the elements, which means that depending on the weather, you'll spend the day either baking in direct sunlight or shivering in cold wind, all while maintaining the appearance of comfortable elegance. Your assigned position is third row center, which means you're visible but not prominent, important enough to be seen, but not important enough to be specifically noticed. You stand with your feet positioned at the precise angle that's been drilled into you during training, your hands folded at exactly the correct level, your face arranged in the expression that suggests serene availability without appearing eager or desperate. The other concubines arrange themselves according to their current ranking in the imperial favor system, which fluctuates based on factors that are never explicitly explained, but seem to involve a combination of beauty, family connections, and the emperor's mood on any given day. Today, Precious Orchid is relegated to the back row, probably because her morning vomiting session left her looking pale and unwell. while elegant Willow has been moved up despite her rash because she's recently received a gift from the Emperor's mother. The waiting begins, and this is where the reality of concubine life becomes most apparent. Hours of standing in uncomfortable positions while looking pleasant and available, never knowing when or if the Emperor might appear, and certainly never knowing whether he'll notice you specifically. Your feet start to ache within the first 30 minutes, but shifting position or showing discomfort would be noted by the attending eunuchs and reported as a lack of proper dedication. Commander Strut has found a marble pedestal that gives him an excellent view of the proceedings, and he's using it as a stage for his own performance. Peacocks, it turns out, are natural entertainers who don't require an audience invitation to begin showing off. He spreads his tail feathers in a display that's genuinely magnificent and completely inappropriate for the solemnity of the occasion, while making noises that sound like rusty hinges mixed with dying cats. The sun climbs higher, and the marble courtyard begins to heat up, which means the makeup on your face starts to feel sticky and warm. The face powder, mixed with lead and applied thickly to achieve the desired pale effect, doesn't respond well to heat and humidity. It begins to cake and crack, creating a texture on your skin that feels like dried mud, but looks worse. The rouge starts to run slightly, creating streaks of color that suggest you've been crying red tears. Your elaborate hairstyle, held in place with egg whites and tree resin, begins to itch more intensely as your scalp heats up. The pins and combs that secure the arrangement seem to dig deeper into your head as the day progresses, creating pressure points that throb in rhythm with your heartbeat. The weight of the hair ornaments becomes more noticeable as your neck muscles tire from holding your head in the required position. The jewelry that seemed merely heavy in the cool morning air now feels like it's burning against your skin as the metal heats up in the sun. The gold chains around your neck conduct heat directly to your skin, creating hot spots that you can't touch or adjust without breaking protocol. The jade bangles on your wrists warm to the point where they're almost too hot to tolerate, but removing them isn't an option. Your silk robes, designed for elegance rather than comfort, trap heat and moisture against your skin while providing no ventilation. The multiple layers that create the desired silhouette also create a personal sauna that makes you sweat more, which makes the fabric stick to your skin more, which creates more heat. It's a cycle that continues throughout the day, getting worse as the sun climbs higher. Commander Strut, apparently unaffected by the heat, continues his performance with increasing enthusiasm. He's discovered that the marble courtyard has excellent acoustics for peacock calls, and he's been systematically testing different vocalizations to see which ones create the most dramatic echoes. The sound bounces off the walls and columns in ways that make everyone's teeth ache, but no one dares to shush the Emperor's favorite bird. The other concubines are dealing with their own heat-related challenges. Beautiful Moon's toothache has gotten worse in the heat, and she's trying to maintain a serene expression while obviously in pain. Elegant Willow's rash has started to spread, probably aggravated by the sweat that's accumulating under her makeup and the lead-based face powder that's creating a chemical reaction with her perspiration. The morning stretches into afternoon without any sign of the Emperor, which isn't unusual, but is always disappointing. Hours of preparation and discomfort for an audience that might not materialize, while maintaining the appearance of hopeful availability throughout. Your back aches from standing in the required posture. Your feet throb in their tiny decorative shoes, and your face feels like it's covered in a mask that's slowly hardening in the heat. The head eunuch makes periodic inspections, walking through the formation while looking for signs of wilting or improper deportment. He carries a small fan that he uses to cool himself while examining concubines, who aren't allowed to show any signs of discomfort. Today he's particularly focused on makeup maintenance, and he's not pleased with the way the heat has affected everyone's carefully applied cosmetics. Commander Strut has apparently decided that the afternoon entertainment should include a demonstration of his hunting skills, and he's begun stalking the small decorative birds that live in the courtyard gardens. His technique involves a lot of dramatic crouching and sudden movements that send his tail feathers flying in all directions, creating a shower of peacock debris that settles on everyone's clothing and hair. The waiting continues, and this is perhaps the most exhausting part of concubine life. Not the physical discomfort, although that's considerable, but the mental strain of maintaining hope and readiness for something that might never happen. Hours of perfect posture and pleasant expressions while your body slowly rebels against the requirements of imperial beauty. Your makeup has now reached the stage where it's more of a problem than an enhancement. The face powder has caked into visible patches, the rouge has streaked, and the lip color has worn off everywhere except the corners of your mouth, creating an effect that suggests you've been eating something messy. But reapplication isn't allowed during formal waiting periods, so you maintain the appearance of serenity while looking increasingly like a melted candle. The afternoon sun beats down on the marble courtyard, turning it into an elegant oven where you're slowly being cooked in silk robes while trying to look like a flower that's definitely not wilting. Commander Strut continues his various performances, apparently immune to heat and completely unaware that his antics are creating additional challenges for everyone else. The day is far from over, and already you're questioning every life choice that led to this moment. But this is only the beginning of your daily routine as an imperial concubine, and there are still many hours of discomfort, protocol, and peacock-related chaos ahead. The real entertainment begins when you're finally deemed ready to move to the main activity of the day, sitting in a room full of other women who are all pretending not to hate each other while competing for the attention of a man who may or may not remember your name. The sitting room is decorated with hand-painted screens depicting pastoral scenes of shepherdesses frolicking in meadows, which is ironic because you're about to spend the next 6 hours in what amounts to a beautifully decorated holding pen. The cushions you're provided are stuffed with something that was probably silk at one point, but has been compressed by hundreds of previous sitters into dense lumps that feel like sitting on decorative rocks. The fabric covering is a gorgeous shade of imperial yellow that shows every stain, and judging by the various discolorations, previous occupants have dealt with everything from spilled tea to what appears to be dried blood from someone's monthly cycle that wasn't properly contained by the inadequate padding they provide for such occasions. Commander Strut has followed the group to the sitting room and immediately claimed the most ornate chair as his personal throne. He's discovered that the chair's carved wooden arms are perfect for sharpening his claws, and the sound of talons scraping against expensive wood creates a noise like fingernails on slate that makes everyone's jaw clench involuntarily. The chair was probably worth more than a farmer's annual income, but it's now being systematically destroyed by a bird who has very specific opinions about furniture maintenance. Your assigned seat is positioned where you can see the door through which the emperor might enter, but it's also directly in line with a bronze incense burner that's been smoking steadily since dawn. The incense is supposed to create a pleasant, spiritual atmosphere, but the particular blend they're using today smells like someone mixed rotting flowers with burnt hair and added just a hint of fish sauce for complexity. The smoke drifts directly into your face every time there's a breeze, making your eyes water and your throat burn. The other concubines arrange themselves according to the complex social hierarchy that governs every interaction in the palace. Precious Orchid, still looking pale from her morning digestive adventure, has been relegated to a corner seat where the cushion stuffing has given up entirely, and she's essentially sitting on a wooden bench covered with decorative fabric. Elegant Willow has managed to secure a better position despite her spreading rash, probably because she's been sharing remedies from her family's medicine collection with the head, eunuch's favorite assistants. The conversation that's expected in these situations follows strict protocols about topics that are acceptable for imperial concubines to discuss. Weather is safe as long as you don't complain about it. Poetry is encouraged, provided you don't quote anything that might be interpreted as political commentary. Family news is permitted if it doesn't involve anyone who's currently out of favor with the court. What you can't discuss is anything relating to your actual feelings about your situation, your opinions about palace management, or your observations about the emperor's personal habits. Beautiful Moon attempts to start a conversation about the morning's flower arrangements, but she's having trouble speaking clearly because her toothache has gotten worse and the left side of her face is visibly swollen. When she opens her mouth, there's a distinct smell of infection that mixes poorly with the incense smoke and creates an aromatic combination that makes everyone nearby suddenly interested in breathing through their mouths only. The tea service begins, which sounds elegant until you realize that 12 women sharing tea means 12 women sharing the same serving vessels, and hygiene standards in the imperial palace are more aspirational than actual. The tea itself has been brewed in water that tastes like it came from the same source as the washing water, and it's been sitting long enough to develop the bitter, metallic flavor that happens when tea oversteeps in metal containers. Your teacup is porcelain, so fine you can see your fingers through it when you hold it up to the light. But it's also been used by countless previous concubines, and the cleaning process involves rinsing with cold water and wiping with cloths that smell suspiciously like they've been used for other purposes. The rim of the cup has a slight stickiness that might be residue from previous lips, or might be something worse. But you're expected to drink from it with every appearance of appreciation for the fine craftsmanship. Commander Strut has discovered that the tea service includes small silver spoons, and he's decided that these make excellent toys for a bored peacock. He grabs one in his beak and begins shaking it vigorously, creating a rattling noise that echoes through the sitting room and making it impossible for anyone to maintain the peaceful, contemplative atmosphere that's supposed to characterize these gatherings. When he drops the spoon, it lands in someone's tea, splashing hot liquid onto silk robes that cost more than most people's houses. The snacks accompanying tea are delicate rice cakes that look like tiny works of art, but have the texture of sweetened cardboard and a flavor that suggests the rice was stored next to something that died several months ago. There are also preserved fruits that have been soaked in honey until they're almost unrecognizably sticky, and nuts that have been roasted with spices that make your tongue tingle in a way that's probably not entirely healthy. The afternoon stretches on with the peculiar combination of boredom and anxiety that characterizes most of palace life. You're constantly alert for the possibility that the emperor might appear, which means maintaining perfect posture and pleasant expression, even though your back is aching from the terrible cushion, and your face is starting to hurt from holding the same smile for hours. Meanwhile, absolutely nothing is happening except the slow passage of time marked by Commander Strut's ongoing destruction of palace property. The other concubines are dealing with their own accumulating discomforts. Precious Orchid keeps making small gagging sounds that suggest her stomach problems aren't entirely resolved, while Elegant Willow is trying not to scratch her rash, which has now spread to her neck and is visible above the collar of her robe. The lead-based makeup everyone is wearing doesn't help with skin irritation, and the combination of metal poisoning and allergic reaction is creating some interesting effects on her complexion. The ventilation in the sitting room is designed more for aesthetics than air circulation, which means that as the day progresses and the sun heats up the building, the air becomes increasingly stale and thick. The incense smoke that seemed merely unpleasant in the morning is now creating a haze that makes breathing feel like work, and the combination of perfumes, cosmetics, and human perspiration is creating an atmosphere that could probably be bottled and sold as a weapon. Your silk robes are now completely saturated with sweat, despite the morning's careful preparation, and the multiple layers that create the desired silhouette have become a personal torture device that traps heat and moisture against your skin while providing no relief. The binding around your chest has become almost unbearably tight as your body swells slightly in the heat, and the tiny shoes that seemed merely uncomfortable in the morning are now creating pressure points that throb with every heartbeat. The head eunuch makes periodic appearances to check on the group's deportment and general presentation, and he's not pleased with what he's seeing. The heat and stress are taking their toll on everyone's carefully applied makeup, and what started as imperial beauty is slowly dissolving into something that looks more like a collection of melting candles, arranged in silk robes. He carries a small hand mirror and uses it to point out specific failures in cosmetic maintenance, which he does with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoys other people's discomfort. Commander Strut has moved on from destroying furniture to investigating the various fabric items in the room, and he's discovered that silk makes interesting tearing sounds when pulled with sufficient force. He's systematically working his way through the decorative cushions, using his claws to create small holes that quickly expand into larger tiers. The sound is like paper ripping, but slower and somehow more personal, as if each piece of destroyed fabric represents another small defeat in the battle to maintain imperial dignity. The conversation has devolved into the kind of stilted exchanges that happen when people are too uncomfortable to think clearly, but still required to appear gracious and engaged. Someone mentions that the fish in the palace pond seem to be dying, which leads to a discussion about water quality that everyone immediately realizes is too close to complaining about palace management. The topic shifts quickly to safer ground, like speculation about whether the kitchen staff will serve the fish that have been floating belly up in the decorative pools. Your stomach begins to make audible protests about the morning's questionable breakfast, and you realize that the combination of stress, heat, bad food, and incense smoke is creating a digestive situation that could become a serious social problem. The sitting room protocol doesn't allow for bathroom breaks unless specifically granted by the supervising eunuch, and asking for permission would require explaining why you need it, which would involve discussing bodily functions that are officially invisible in the Imperial Concubine system. The afternoon light filtering through the silk window screens creates beautiful patterns on the walls, but it also reveals the dust motes floating in the stagnant air, and some of those dust motes appear to be moving in ways that suggest they might actually be small insects. The palace has an ongoing relationship with various forms of wildlife that aren't officially acknowledged, but are definitely present, and the sitting room seems to be hosting its share of tiny flying things that are attracted to the combination of perfume, incense, and human warmth. Elegant Willow finally succumbs to the need to scratch her rash, but she's trying to do it discreetly by rubbing against the back of her chair in a way that looks like casual fidgeting. The chair back is decorated with carved flowers that have pointed edges, and the scratching motion is creating small tears in her robe while providing minimal relief for her irritated skin. The head eunuch notices the movement and makes a note on the small tablet he carries for recording infractions. The tea has gone cold, which normally wouldn't matter except that cold tea made from questionable water and oversteeped leaves tastes significantly worse than hot tea with the same problems. The flavor has evolved from merely bitter to actively unpleasant, with metallic undertones that suggest the serving vessels to think about. But refusing to continue drinking, while haven't been properly cleaned in longer than anyone wants to be interpreted as criticism of the palace tea service, so everyone continues taking small sips while trying not to make faces. Commander Strut has discovered that the silk wall hangings make excellent climbing surfaces, and he's begun scaling them like a feathered mountaineer with questionable judgment. His claws catch in the delicate fabric and create long runs that spread across the painted scenes of pastoral tranquility, turning shepherdesses into abstract art and meadows into torn landscapes. The hangings are probably irreplaceable historical artifacts, but they're being systematically destroyed by a bird who thinks they were installed for his personal entertainment. The boredom is becoming almost physically painful, a kind of mental ache that makes time feel like it's moving backward. You've been sitting in the same position for so long that parts of your body have gone numb, but shifting position would be noticed and recorded as a sign of insufficient dedication to your imperial duties. The cushion beneath you has compressed to the point where you're essentially sitting on the wooden chair frame, and you can feel the decorative carvings creating pressure points against your bones. Your face feels like it's covered in a slowly hardening mask as the makeup continues to react poorly to the heat and humidity. The lead-based powder is creating a texture on your skin that feels like dried mud, and you can taste the metallic flavor of the cosmetics as they slowly dissolve and run into your mouth. The rouge has long since stopped looking like a healthy glow and now resembles the kind of feverish flush that suggests serious illness. The incense burner continues its relentless production of smoke that smells like a perfume factory caught fire, and the lack of air circulation means the smoke just accumulates in layers throughout the room. Your eyes are constantly watering, which is creating streaks in your makeup that probably make you look like you've been crying, which would be accurate if crying were permitted during formal sitting periods. Beautiful Moon's tooth problem has reached the stage where she's obviously in significant pain, but acknowledging pain would require medical attention, and medical attention would mean admitting that palace life has physical consequences that aren't supposed to exist. Instead, she's trying to maintain a serene expression while obviously suffering, which creates a disconcerting effect where her face looks peaceful, but her eyes suggest someone who's being slowly tortured. The afternoon stretches on with the particular quality of time that happens when you're uncomfortable, but required to appear comfortable, bored but required to appear engaged, and increasingly desperate but required to appear serene. It's a masterclass in the gap between appearance and reality that defines most of palace life, where everything looks magnificent from a distance, but reveals itself to be various forms of elaborate suffering when experienced up close. Commander Strut has moved on from destroying fabric to investigating the contents of the tea service, and he's discovered that sugar cubes make satisfying crunching sounds when crushed in a peacock beak. He's systematically working his way through the sweetener supply, while making the kind of aggressive chewing noises that suggests he's personally offended by the existence of refined sugar. The sound echoes off the walls in a way that makes everyone's teeth ache sympathetically. Your stomach problems have progressed to the point where you're having to concentrate on not making audible digestive sounds, which is difficult when you're required to sit in silence, and the room's acoustics are designed to amplify everything. The morning's questionable fish paste is apparently having a delayed reaction, and the combination of stress and bad food is creating internal pressure that threatens to become a social emergency at any moment. The silk robes that looked so elegant in the morning are now revealing their practical limitations in spectacular fashion. They're designed for looking beautiful while standing perfectly still in cool weather, not for sitting for hours in increasing heat while trying not to move. The fabric has begun to stick to your skin in uncomfortable ways, and you can feel sweat pooling in places where the multiple layers create heat traps that have no ventilation. The other concubines are showing similar signs of deterioration. Precious Orchid has developed a slight tremor that might be from hunger, dehydration, or just the stress of trying to maintain perfect posture while feeling increasingly unwell. Elegant Willow's rash has continued spreading and is now visible on her hands, creating red patches that contrast dramatically with the white lead powder she's wearing as makeup. The head eunuch returns for another inspection and is visibly displeased with the general decline in presentation quality. He makes notes about makeup failures, posture problems, and what he describes as insufficient enthusiasm for imperial service, which seems to mean that everyone looks as miserable as they feel, despite their best efforts to hide it. He announces that evening preparations will include additional beauty treatments to repair the damage done by the afternoon's activities. Commander Strut chooses this moment to demonstrate his opinion of authority figures by deliberately knocking over a small decorative table that holds additional tea supplies. The crash echoes through the sitting room, and porcelain fragments scatter across the floor in a pattern that suggests the table's contents were more extensive than anyone realized. The peacock looks directly at the head eunuch and makes the noise that peacocks make when they want everyone to know they're not sorry about anything. The day is far from over, and already the gap between the morning's hopes and the afternoon's reality has become a chasm that no amount of silk, robes, and gold jewelry can bridge. You're beginning to understand why so many imperial concubines develop mysterious illnesses that conveniently keep them confined to bed, and why others seem to age at an accelerated rate that has nothing to do with natural time and everything to do with the accumulated stress of trying to be a living decoration in a system that values appearance over humanity. The evening activities are approaching, which means more preparation, more waiting, and more opportunities for things to go wrong in ways that are both predictable and somehow still surprising. Commander Strut is showing no signs of tiring. The incense burner continues its assault on everyone's respiratory systems, and your digestive problems are developing into what feels like a full-scale internal rebellion that threatens to make the rest of the day even more challenging than it already promises to be. The evening entertainment schedule begins with what the palace calls musical appreciation, which sounds cultured until you realize it involves sitting on those same compressed cushions for another 3 hours, while court musicians play instruments that sound like cats being systematically tortured. The musicians are technically skilled, but the acoustics in the entertainment hall were designed by someone who apparently believed that music should physically assault the listener's eardrums, while echoing off marble walls in ways that make your molars ache. Your assigned seating for this cultural experience is directly beneath a bronze wind chime that some decorator thought would add atmospheric charm, but instead creates a constant metallic tinkling every time someone breathes too heavily. The sound mixes with the musician's efforts to create an auditory landscape that feels like being trapped inside a jewelry box that's falling down a flight of stairs. Commander Strut has followed the group to the entertainment hall and immediately claimed the best acoustic position, where his periodic peacock commentary blends seamlessly with the instrumental torture session. The hall itself is a masterpiece of imperial architecture, with painted ceilings depicting celestial scenes and walls covered in silk panels that show pastoral landscapes. Unfortunately, the beauty is somewhat undermined by the fact that the ventilation system involves small holes near the floor that allow cold drafts to creep up your legs while your upper body bakes in the stagnant air trapped near the ceiling. You spend the evening with feet that are slowly going numb while your face continues to melt in the accumulated heat from dozens of bodies and oil lamps. Your evening makeup has been reapplied to repair the damage done by the afternoon's activities, which means another layer of lead-based powder over the cracked remnants of the morning's cosmetics. The texture on your face now resembles tree bark, with areas where the new powder has mixed with dried sweat to create a paste that pulls at your skin every time you change expressions. The rouge has been refreshed with what appears to be the same insect-based product, but now it's creating a chemical reaction with the accumulated makeup beneath, producing patches of color that shift from red to purple as the evening progresses. The musicians begin their performance with what sounds like a funeral dirge, played on instruments that haven't been properly tuned since the dynasty began. The combination of off-key strings, wheezing wind instruments, and percussion that seems to be operated by someone having a personal vendetta against rhythm creates a soundscape that makes your teeth clench involuntarily. Commander Strut responds to the music by beginning his own performance, which involves spreading his tail feathers and making aggressive, honking sounds that somehow improve the overall acoustic experience. Beautiful Moon's dental situation has reached critical mass, and the infection in her tooth has progressed to the point where the left side of her face is visibly swollen, and she's making small whimpering sounds that harmonize disturbingly with the musical performance. The smell of infection has gotten stronger throughout the day, creating a sweet, rotting odor that mixes with the incense and perfume to produce an atmosphere that could probably be weaponized if properly concentrated. The entertainment continues with a poetry recitation that involves a court poet standing on a raised platform while dramatically gesturing with hands that appear to have been stained with something that might be ink, but looks suspiciously like dried blood. His voice carries across the hall with the kind of projection that suggests he believes volume can substitute for actual talent, and his chosen poems seem to focus heavily on themes of suffering and loss, which feels appropriate given your current situation. Your digestive problems have evolved throughout the day from minor discomfort to what feels like a full-scale internal war between the morning's fish paste and whatever preservatives were used in the afternoon snacks. The combination of stress, heat, bad food, and the constant requirement to maintain perfect posture has created intestinal pressure that threatens to become audible, which would be a social catastrophe of epic proportions. The sitting position required for proper imperial deportment does nothing to help with digestive comfort, and the tight binding around your midsection makes every internal rumble feel like it might be visible to observers. The silk cushions have now compressed to the point where you're essentially sitting on decorative wood, and the pressure points created by the chair's carved details are creating numbness that spreads up your legs and into your lower back. Your feet, compressed into those tiny decorative shoes for more than 12 hours, have swollen to the point where the footwear feels like it's slowly cutting off circulation. You can no longer feel your toes, which is probably a mercy given the way the shoes were designed to create artificial delicacy through systematic compression. Commander Strut has discovered that the entertainment hall contains several decorative screens made from stretched silk, and he's begun testing their structural integrity by walking across them like a feathered tightrope performer. Each step creates small tears in the fabric that spread outward in web patterns, turning pastoral scenes into abstract art. The screens were probably worth more than most people's houses, but they're being systematically destroyed by a bird who thinks they were installed for his personal amusement. The evening's cultural program includes a demonstration of traditional dance, which involves performers in elaborate costumes, moving in patterns that were probably graceful when originally choreographed, but now look like people having coordinated seizures while wearing too much fabric. The dancers' faces are painted with the same lead-based cosmetics that you're wearing, and as they move under the oil lamps, you can see the makeup beginning to run and crack, creating effects that suggest they're slowly melting while trying to maintain artistic expression. The dance performance is accompanied by additional musicians who seem to be playing entirely different songs from the original group, creating a layered cacophony that makes your skull feel like it's being used as a percussion instrument. The competing rhythms and melodies blend into something that could probably be used to extract confessions from political prisoners, and Commander Strut responds by increasing the volume and frequency of his own vocalizations until he's essentially leading an avant-garde orchestra of dissatisfied peacock sounds. Your evening robes, which were fresh and clean when you put them on 6 hours ago, are now saturated with sweat, makeup residue, and the accumulated atmospheric moisture from dozens of overheated bodies in an underventilated room. The silk that looked so elegant in the afternoon has begun to stick to your skin in uncomfortable patterns, and you can feel dampness spreading across your back where the multiple layers have created a personal greenhouse effect that traps heat and moisture against your body. The other concubines are showing similar signs of deterioration. Precious Orchid has developed a slight tremor that might be from dehydration, hunger, or just the accumulated stress of trying to maintain perfect posture while feeling increasingly unwell. Her morning vomiting session seems to have been the beginning of a digestive problem that's continued throughout the day, and she's now making small gagging sounds that suggest her stomach is still rebelling against the palace food service. Elegant Willow's rash has continued spreading and is now visible on her neck, arms, and what you can see of her chest above her robe's neckline. The lead-based makeup isn't helping with the skin irritation, and the combination of metal poisoning and allergic reaction is creating patches of inflamed skin that contrast dramatically with the white powder she's wearing. She's trying not to scratch, but the effort is creating a kind of whole-body tension that makes her look like she's being slowly electrocuted while trying to maintain imperial dignity. The entertainment continues with what the program describes as interpretive storytelling, which involves a performer acting out ancient legends while wearing a mask that appears to have been carved from wood and painted with pigments that smell like they contain lead, mercury, and possibly arsenic. The stories themselves seem to focus on themes of betrayal, suffering, and death, which creates an atmosphere of cheerful optimism that perfectly complements your current physical and emotional state. The oil lamps that provide lighting for the evening's festivities are creating more heat than illumination, and the combination of burning oil and melting candle wax is producing a smell that suggests someone decided to cook rancid butter in a fish market. The smoke from the lamps mixes with the incense that's been burning continuously since dawn, creating an atmospheric haze that makes breathing feel like work and looking across the room like peering through fog. Your face has reached the stage where the accumulated layers of makeup feel like a mask that's slowly hardening and cracking with every micro-expression. You can taste the metallic flavor of lead powder as it dissolves and runs into your mouth, and the rouge has begun to create a burning sensation on your cheeks that suggests the insect-based pigments are having a chemical reaction with your sweat. The lip color disappeared hours ago, leaving only a faint stain around the edges of your mouth that makes you look like you've been eating berries without proper utensils. The evening's schedule includes periodic breaks for refreshment, which sounds promising until you realize that the refreshments consist of more of the same questionable tea served in vessels that have been used by dozens of other people throughout the day. The tea itself has been sitting in metal containers long enough to develop the bitter, metallic taste that happens when liquid sits too long in contact with oxidizing metal, and the temperature has reached that perfect lukewarm point where it's neither refreshing nor warming, just unpleasantly tepid. Commander Strut has moved on from destroying screens to investigating the refreshment service, and he's discovered that the small cakes accompanying the tea make excellent projectiles when grabbed in a peacock beak and flung with sufficient force. He's systematically working his way through the food display, testing the aerodynamic properties of various pastries while creating a shower of crumbs and frosting that settles on everyone's carefully arranged hair and clothing. The musical performance reaches what appears to be a climactic moment, involving all the musicians playing different songs simultaneously while the dancers perform increasingly frantic movements that suggest they're either reaching artistic transcendence or having coordinated nervous breakdowns. The sound level reaches the point where you can feel the vibrations in your chest, and Commander Strut responds by beginning what can only be described as a peacock aria that drowns out even the most enthusiastic instrumental efforts. Your digestive situation has progressed to the point where you're having to concentrate on breathing in a way that doesn't create audible internal sounds, which is challenging when you're supposed to appear serene and engaged with the cultural programming. The tight binding around your midsection makes every internal pressure wave feel like it might be externally visible, and the combination of stress and bad food is creating gastric effects that threaten to become a social emergency at any moment. The seating arrangement means you're surrounded by other concubines who are dealing with their own, accumulating physical problems, creating a group dynamic where everyone is trying not to notice or acknowledge the various sounds, smells, and visible signs of discomfort that are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The Imperial Protocol requires maintaining an appearance of peaceful appreciation for the evening's entertainment, regardless of what's actually happening to your body or your mental state. The poetry recitation continues with increasingly dramatic gestures from the performer, who has apparently decided that the best way to convey emotional depth is through volume, and wild arm movements that spray droplets of sweat across the first few rows of the audience. His chosen poems seem to focus on themes of lost love and inevitable death, which creates exactly the kind of uplifting atmosphere you need after spending 12 hours slowly deteriorating in silk robes while pretending to be a living decoration. The evening air filtering through the hall's inadequate ventilation system carries the accumulated sense of the day's activities: melting makeup, overheated silk, burning oil, incense smoke, and the various biological processes that happen when dozens of people spend extended periods in elaborate clothing designed more for appearance than comfort. The combination creates an atmospheric cocktail that could probably be classified as a form of chemical warfare if properly analyzed. Beautiful Moon's tooth infection has reached the stage where she's obviously in significant pain but still required to maintain the appearance of enjoying the evening's entertainment. The swelling has progressed to the point where the left side of her face looks noticeably different from the right, and the smell of infection is becoming strong enough that people near her are unconsciously leaning away while trying to appear engaged with the performances. The dance presentation concludes with what appears to be a dramatic death scene involving all the performers, collapsing in elaborate poses while the musicians create sounds that suggest they're also dying, possibly from the same mysterious ailment. Commander Strut responds to this artistic finale by beginning his own death scene, which involves lying on his side while making pathetic peeping sounds that somehow manage to be both more convincing and more entertaining than the professional performance. Your evening jewelry has now been in contact with your overheated skin for so many hours that the metal has become uncomfortably warm, and the weight distribution is creating pressure points that throb in rhythm with your heartbeat. The gold chains around your neck feel like they're conducting heat directly into your skin, and the jade bangles on your wrists have become slippery with perspiration, threatening to slide off at inappropriate moments during the formal proceedings. The entertainment program includes what's described as audience participation, which fills you with dread because participation in imperial entertainment usually means being required to demonstrate appreciation in ways that reveal just how miserable you actually are. Tonight's participation involves applauding at designated moments, which sounds simple until you realize that your hands are so swollen from heat and constriction that clapping creates a sound more like wet meat slapping together than the crisp, enthusiastic applause that's expected. The final performance of the evening is introduced as a musical meditation that involves a single musician playing what appears to be a stringed instrument that's been designed by someone who had heard descriptions of music but had never actually experienced it personally. The sounds produced suggest that the instrument is either badly tuned or actively rebelling against being played, and the musician's intense concentration suggests he believes that sufficient focus can overcome fundamental problems with the equipment. Commander Strut has apparently decided that musical meditation requires audience participation, and he begins providing percussion accompaniment by attacking various decorative objects with his beak and claws. The rhythmic destruction creates a counterpoint to the string instrument that actually improves the overall musical experience, which says something disturbing about the quality of Imperial entertainment standards. The meditation continues for what feels like several geological eras, but is probably only about an hour, during which you're required to maintain a posture of peaceful contemplation while your body systematically rebels against every aspect of your current situation. Your feet have progressed beyond numbness to the kind of swollen aching that suggests circulation problems. Your back feels like it's being slowly compressed by the weight of your elaborate hairstyle, and your face has reached the stage where the accumulated makeup feels like a slowly hardening mask that cracks with every involuntary expression. The evening's cultural program finally concludes with what's described as a blessing ceremony that involves everyone standing while a priest or religious official says words in a language that might be ancient Chinese, or might just be someone making sounds that seem appropriately mystical. Standing after hours of sitting on compressed cushions creates an immediate rush of pins and needles as blood flow returns to compressed areas, and the sudden change in position makes you realize just how much your body has adapted to being slowly tortured in silk robes. The procession back to the concubine quarters begins, with everyone attempting to walk with imperial grace, despite the fact that most people can barely feel their feet, and several concubines are visibly swaying from dehydration, exhaustion, and the accumulated effects of spending 14 hours in elaborate costumes designed by people who apparently believed that beauty required systematic physical discomfort. Commander Strutt leads the procession, having apparently decided that he's now in charge of the group's movement patterns. Your evening shoes, which were merely uncomfortable in the morning, have now become instruments of precision torture that create sharp pains with every step. The swelling in your feet has progressed to the point where the shoes feel like they're slowly cutting off circulation, and each step sends shooting pains up your legs that you have to disguise as the graceful gliding motion that's expected of imperial concubines, moving through palace corridors. The corridors themselves seem longer than they were in the morning, possibly because walking has become significantly more difficult, or possibly because time moves differently when you're experiencing the kind of full-body discomfort that makes every step a conscious effort. The marble floors that looked so elegant in the daylight now feel like walking on ice, and the decorative rugs are positioned in ways that create small obstacles that challenge your remaining balance and coordination. The return journey to the quarters involves navigating stairs that were clearly designed by someone who believed that steps should be exactly the wrong height for human legs, especially human legs that are wearing tiny shoes and have been compressed into uncomfortable positions for most of the day. Each step up requires conscious effort to lift feet that you can barely feel, while maintaining the appearance of effortless grace that's supposedly natural. Strutt has discovered that stairs provide excellent opportunities for showing to properly trained imperial concubines. Commander off, and he begins hopping from step to step while spreading his tail feathers and making triumphant, honking sounds that echo through the corridor in ways that make everyone's remaining energy evaporate. His performance creates a moving obstacle that everyone has to navigate around while maintaining proper formation and appropriate dignity levels. The evening air in the corridors carries the accumulated sense of the day's activities, and walking through it feels like moving through layers of different atmospheric problems. Near the kitchens, there's the smell of food that's been sitting too long, mixed with cleaning products that don't quite mask underlying odors. Near the administrative areas, there's the scent of ink, paper, and what might be fierce sweat from people dealing with imperial bureaucracy. Near the quarters, there's the familiar combination of perfume, cosmetics, and the biological realities of multiple people living in close proximity. Your evening robes have now reached the stage where they're more of a wearable sauna than clothing, and the accumulated moisture has created areas where the fabric clings to your skin in patterns that reveal exactly how much you've been sweating, despite your best efforts to maintain imperial composure. The multiple layers that created such elegant silhouettes in the morning now feel like wearing several blankets in a steam bath while trying to walk gracefully across uneven surfaces. The other concubines are showing various stages of deterioration that mirror your own experience. Precious Orchid is moving with the careful precision of someone whose digestive system is still actively rebelling against the day's food choices, while Elegant Willow is trying not to scratch her spreading rash, which has now progressed to the point where it's visible above her collar and creating obvious discomfort that she's not allowed to acknowledge or address. Beautiful Moon is walking with the kind of careful head positioning that suggests her tooth infection has progressed to the point where any jarring movement creates significant pain, and the swelling has become pronounced enough that her face looks noticeably asymmetrical. The smell of infection has intensified throughout the day, creating an aura around her that makes other people unconsciously maintain slightly larger distances, while pretending not to notice anything unusual. The final approach to the concubine quarters involves passing through a courtyard, where the evening air should provide relief from the accumulated heat and stuffiness of the indoor spaces, but instead carries the sense from the palace's various waste management systems, which apparently include areas where things had been sitting in the heat all day, developing into atmospheric problems that assault your already overwhelmed senses. Commander Strut has apparently decided that the evening's entertainment should conclude with a grand finale, and he begins running in circles, while making the kind of aggressive peacock sounds that suggest he's either celebrating the end of the day or preparing to attack something. His performance creates a moving hazard that everyone has to navigate around while maintaining the appearance of serene dignity, despite the fact that most people are barely capable of walking in straight lines at this point. The entrance to the concubine quarters appears ahead like a mirage of potential relief, but you know that reaching your sleeping area only means transitioning from one form of discomfort to another. The evening routine still requires removing all the elaborate clothing and jewelry, cleaning off the accumulated makeup and cosmetics, and preparing for a night of sleep on those same compressed mattresses, while sharing space with the same roommates, who have spent the day accumulating their own collection of physical and atmospheric problems. Your feet have reached the stage where each step creates shooting pains that travel up your legs and into your back. But you're almost at the end of this particular ordeal. The day that began with such elaborate preparation and hopeful expectations has devolved into a marathon of systematic discomfort, punctuated by moments of genuine misery, all while maintaining the appearance of grateful participation in imperial luxury. The evening's final challenge involves climbing the steps to the quarters, while wearing shoes that no longer fit properly on feet that have swollen beyond their mooring dimensions, carrying the weight of jewelry that has become increasingly uncomfortable throughout the day, and maintaining the posture required for imperial dignity, despite the fact that your spine feels like it's been slowly compressed by the weight of your elaborate hairstyle and the constant requirement to hold positions that aren't designed for human comfort. Commander Strut follows the group up the stairs, apparently determined to supervise the evening's conclusion, and his presence guarantees that tomorrow will bring more of the same peacock-related complications that have punctuated today's series of small disasters. He settles onto his preferred perch with the satisfaction of someone who has successfully created chaos throughout an entire day, while remaining completely unaware that his behavior has contributed to everyone else's misery. The quarters themselves feel like stepping into a humid cave that's been occupied by too many people for too long, and the air carries all the scents you remember from the morning, plus the additional atmospheric complications that have developed throughout the day. The combination of perfume, cosmetics, sweat, incense, and various biological processes creates an environment that could probably be used as a form of torture if properly concentrated and administered systematically. Your sleeping area awaits with that same compressed mattress, the same itchy bedding, and the same peacock-related territorial disputes that will undoubtedly continue through the night. Tomorrow will bring another round of elaborate preparation, uncomfortable waiting, and systematic physical discomfort, all in service of maintaining your position as a decorative human being in a system that values appearance over comfort, dignity over humanity, and tradition over basic physical well-being. And as you begin the process of removing the day's accumulated layers of silk, jewelry, and cosmetics, you realize that being an imperial concubine isn't about romance, luxury, or power. It's about endurance, tolerance for discomfort, and the ability to maintain gracious appearances while your body slowly rebels against every aspect of your daily routine. Congratulations, you've survived day 1. There are only several thousand more just like it ahead of you. The really exciting part of your evening begins when you're finally allowed to return to your sleeping quarters, where you discover that your roommate, Precious Orchid, has spent the afternoon decorating your shared space with what appears to be the contents of her stomach. Except this time it's projectile, and it smells like fermented fish sauce, mixed with rotting cabbage and something that might be bile, but has the consistency of egg whites that have been left in the sun for a week. Your sleeping mat, which was questionable this morning, has now absorbed enough moisture from the day's humidity that it feels like lying down on a giant sponge. That's been soaked in lukewarm tea and wrung out by someone with questionable hygiene standards. The silk batting that was supposed to provide cushioning has clumped together into lumps that feel like sleeping on a collection of dead mice wrapped in expensive fabric. And when you press down on the surface, you can actually hear liquid squelching between the layers. Commander Strut has apparently spent his afternoon establishing a more permanent claim to your corner of the room, and the evidence of his territorial expansion includes what can only be described as peacock graffiti. He's systematically marked every surface within reach with a combination of droppings and some kind of oily secretion that peacocks produce when they're feeling particularly possessive. The smell is like wet feathers mixed with rancid butter, and just a hint of something that suggests he's been eating things that aren't part of his official diet. The evening undressing routine begins with the removal of jewelry that has now been in contact with your overheated skin for so long that the metal has left green marks where the cheaper pieces have oxidized, and red welts where the heavier items have been pressing against pressure points all day. Your gold necklaces have to be peeled away from your neck because they'd essentially glued themselves to your skin with a combination of sweat, makeup residue, and what might be an allergic reaction to whatever metal alloy was used in the cheaper decorative elements. The process of removing your evening robes reveals the full extent of the day's damage to your physical person. The silk has left dye stains on your skin in patterns that mirror the fabric's design, creating a temporary tattoo effect that would be artistic if it weren't accompanied by areas of raw, irritated skin where the fabric has been rubbing against the same spots for 14 hours. The binding around your chest has left deep red marks that throb when you touch them, and removing it creates the kind of relief that makes you dizzy from the sudden change in circulation. Your undergarments have reached a state that can only be described as biological disaster. The thin silk layers that were supposed to create smooth lines have instead created a breeding ground for moisture and bacteria that has produced its own microclimate. When you peel away the fabric, it makes a sound like removing medical tape, and the smell that's released suggests that your personal ecosystem has evolved beyond anything that should exist on a human body. Commander Strut chooses this moment to demonstrate his opinion of the undressing process by knocking over the basin of washing water with a precise wing movement that sends lukewarm, stale water cascading across the floor and onto your discarded robes. The water immediately begins to smell worse as it mixes with the accumulated scents from the fabric, creating an aromatic combination that suggests someone decided to wash dirty laundry in soup that's been sitting out too long. The washing facilities consist of a marble basin that looks elegant until you realize it's been used by 12 women throughout the day, and the water hasn't been changed since this morning. The surface of the water has developed a thin film that might be soap residue or might be something organic, and when you disturb it by dipping your hands in, it breaks apart in patterns that suggest it has achieved some level of structural integrity through prolonged contact with various cosmetic products and human secretions. The soap provided for evening cleaning is made from animal fat and ash, which sounds traditional until you experience the texture, which is like trying to clean yourself with a mixture of cold gravy and sand. It doesn't lather so much as smear across your skin, while leaving a residue that feels simultaneously greasy and gritty, and the scent suggests the animal fat wasn't particularly fresh when it was converted into cleaning products. Your face requires special attention because the accumulated layers of lead-based powder, insect-derived rouge, and various other cosmetic products have created a surface that has to be scraped off rather than washed. The removal process involves rubbing with rough cloth until your skin is raw, and the residue that comes off looks like colored mud mixed with dead skin cells and what might be small pieces of the insects that were crushed to create the pigments. Precious Orchid finally emerges from her latest digestive episode, looking like someone who's been through a particularly brutal form of medieval medical treatment, which is probably accurate given the palace's approach to healthcare. Her skin has taken on a grayish tone that suggests dehydration, and she's moving with the careful precision of someone whose internal organs are actively rebelling against continued existence in this environment. The evening hair routine involves removing the dozens of pins and combs that have been digging into your scalp all day, and each one comes out with a small collection of hair that's been pulled out by the roots, along with what appears to be dried scalp oil mixed with whatever pomade was used to hold the style in place. The pomade has hardened to the point where it has to be scraped out with a special comb, and the process sounds like someone slowly tearing fabric while producing bits of debris that smell like rancid animal fat mixed with old flowers. Your scalp, once freed from its elaborate architectural constraints, feels like it's been used as a pin cushion by someone with poor aim and aggressive tendencies. The areas where the pins were inserted throb with each heartbeat, and touching your head reveals patches where the tight styling has actually created small bald spots from the constant tension on individual hair follicles. The sleeping clothes provided for nighttime are made from silk that's been washed so many times it has the texture of wet paper, and when you put them on, they immediately stick to any remaining moisture on your skin while providing absolutely no insulation against the cold drafts that creep through the quarter's inadequate weatherproofing. The fabric has absorbed the scents of every previous occupant, creating a layered aromatic experience that suggests the garments haven't been properly cleaned in longer than anyone wants to think about. Commander Strut has settled into his evening routine, which involves making territorial rounds of the sleeping area, while occasionally stopping to attack random objects that he perceives as threats to his dominance. Tonight he's particularly focused on a silk cushion that someone left near your sleeping mat, and he's been systematically shredding it with his claws while making the low, rumbling sounds that peacocks make when they're concentrating on destruction. The other concubines are dealing with their own evening challenges. Beautiful Moon's tooth infection has reached the stage where she's obviously running a fever, and the smell of infection has intensified to the point where it's creating its own atmospheric zone around her sleeping area. She's trying to clean the wound with the same questionable washing water everyone else is using, which probably isn't improving her situation, but is definitely making the air quality worse for everyone nearby. Elegant Willow's rash has continued spreading and is now covering most of her visible skin in patches of angry red inflammation that she's trying to soothe with some kind of herbal paste that smells like rotting vegetables mixed with medicinal alcohol. The paste has the consistency of cold oatmeal and leaves green stains on everything it touches. But it seems to provide some relief from the itching that's been tormenting her all day. The evening meal consists of leftovers from the afternoon's questionable food service, except now they've been sitting in metal containers for several additional hours, developing new flavors and textures that suggest active decomposition. The rice porridge has separated into layers, with a skin of congealed starch on top and a watery layer beneath that tastes like it's been filtered through dirty socks. Your digestive system, which has been under siege all day from various questionable food choices, finally reaches its breaking point during the evening meal. The combination of stress, heat, bad food, and the accumulated effects of lead-based cosmetics creates a perfect storm of gastrointestinal rebellion that announces itself with sounds that echo off the walls in ways that make everyone pretend not to notice, while obviously hearing everything. The sleeping arrangements reveal their own special challenges as night falls and the temperature drops. The quarters that felt stifling during the day become drafty and cold once the sun sets. But the blankets provided are made from wool that's been processed using methods that apparently didn't include washing, so they smell like wet sheep mixed with whatever chemicals were used in the dyeing process. Commander Strut has claimed a perch directly above your sleeping area, and peacocks, it turns out, are not quiet sleepers. Throughout the night, he makes various sounds that suggest he's either having vivid dreams or conducting conversations with invisible peacock companions. The sounds range from soft clucking noises to sudden loud honks that wake everyone up just as they're drifting off to sleep. Your sleeping mat has absorbed enough moisture throughout the day that lying down on it feels like climbing into a bed made from damp towels, and the compressed batting beneath provides about as much cushioning as a thin layer of wet cardboard. Every position you try creates new pressure points against the hard floor beneath, and turning over requires careful maneuvering to avoid the wet spots where various liquids have soaked through the fabric. The air quality in the sleeping quarters degrades steadily throughout the night as 12 women in a poorly ventilated space produce the various atmospheric byproducts of human existence. The combination of breath, perspiration, digestive gases, and the lingering effects of the day's cosmetic products creates an environment that could probably be used as a form of chemical warfare if properly concentrated and deployed. Precious Orchid's digestive problems continue throughout the night with periodic episodes that wake everyone up and add new layers to the room's already complex, aromatic profile. Each episode seems worse than the last, suggesting that whatever she ate for breakfast is having a prolonged and increasingly dramatic effect on her internal systems, and the sounds echo off the walls in ways that make sleep essentially impossible for everyone else. The peacock situation escalates around midnight, when Commander Strut apparently decides that the sleeping quarters need better security, and he begins patrolling the room while making aggressive, territorial calls that sound like someone torturing a brass instrument. His patrol route takes him directly over everyone's sleeping areas, and his claws create scratching sounds against the floor that suggest he's either marking territory or trying to dig escape tunnels. Your attempts at sleep are further complicated by the discovery that silk sleeping garments have no temperature regulation properties whatsoever, so you alternate between being too hot when you're under the wool blanket and too cold when you're not, while the fabric clings to your skin with the persistence of something that's been designed specifically to create maximum discomfort in all weather conditions. The night sounds from outside the quarters include various palace activities that continue after dark, including what sounds like someone moving heavy objects across stone floors, periodic shouting that might be guards changing shifts, or might be someone dealing with an emergency, and animal sounds that suggest the Imperial menagerie includes creatures that are most active when everyone else is trying to sleep. Beautiful Moon's fever worsens throughout the night, and she begins making delirious sounds that suggest her tooth infection has progressed to the point where it's affecting her mental state. The smell of infection intensifies as her body temperature rises, creating a sweet, rotting odor that mixes with the room's other atmospheric problems to create something that could probably be classified as a biological hazard. The wool blankets, in addition to smelling like wet livestock, have the texture of fabric that's been woven from the coarsest possible fibers and then treated with something that makes it scratch against your skin like sandpaper made from sheep hair. Every movement under the blanket creates friction that leaves your skin feeling raw, and the static electricity generated by the wool attracts every piece of dust and debris in the room. Commander Strutt's nocturnal activities reach a crescendo around 2 in the morning when he apparently decides that the silk wall hangings need to be tested for structural integrity, and he begins climbing them like a feathered mountaineer with destruction on his mind. The sound of claws against silk creates a noise like someone slowly tearing expensive fabric, which is exactly what's happening, and the hangings begin to develop long tiers that spread across the painted scenes like abstract art created by an angry bird. Your skin, after a full day of contact with lead-based cosmetics, begins to react in ways that suggest the metal poisoning is having cumulative effects. Areas where the makeup was applied most heavily develop a burning sensation that intensifies throughout the night, and touching these areas reveals that your skin has developed a texture that feels like it's been lightly sandblasted with toxic materials. The sleeping mat situation deteriorates further as the night progresses and more moisture accumulates from various sources. What started as merely damp evolves into actively wet in several spots, and the batting beneath has compressed to the point where you're essentially lying on a thin layer of soggy silk over a hard wooden floor that seems designed to create maximum pressure on every bone in your body. Elegant Willow's herbal paste treatment begins to have unexpected side effects around 3 in the morning, and she starts making sounds that suggest the rotting vegetable mixture is either working too well or having reactions that weren't mentioned in whatever medieval medical text recommended this approach. The smell of the paste intensifies as it warms against her skin, creating an aroma that suggests someone decided to make soup from plants that have been dead too long. The air circulation in the quarters reaches a critical point where the accumulated atmospheric problems begin to create their own weather system. The humidity from 12 breathing, perspiring humans combined with the various evaporating liquids creates a microclimate that feels like being inside, a cloud made from biological processes, and breathing becomes conscious work rather than an automatic function. Your digestive system continues its rebellion throughout the night, with periodic episodes that require careful maneuvering to avoid, creating social disasters while dealing with the physical realities of eating questionable food for extended periods. The tight confines of the sleeping quarters mean that every sound and smell becomes a shared experience, whether anyone wants it to be or not. Commander Strutt settles into a pattern of hourly territorial announcements that involve spreading his tail feathers and making aggressive honking sounds that echo off the walls and wake everyone just as they're finally drifting off to sleep. His timing suggests either supernatural awareness of human sleep cycles or pure malicious intent, and the effect is to create a form of sleep deprivation torture administered by an overgrown bird with attitude problems. The wool blankets begin to shed throughout the night, releasing fibers that float through the air and settle on every surface, including your face and in your mouth, creating the sensation of slowly being covered in itchy wool dust while trying to breathe through fabric particles that taste like wet sheep mixed with whatever chemicals were used in the processing. The morning light begins to filter through the quarters around 5, revealing the full extent of the night's accumulated damage to both the room and its occupants. The air has developed a visible haze from the various evaporating substances, and every surface shows evidence of the night's activities, including peacock damage, moisture stains, and what appears to be the residue from various human biological processes that have been occurring in inadequate privacy. Your silk sleeping garments have absorbed enough moisture and atmospheric contamination throughout the night that they've essentially become wearable representations of everything wrong with the quarters environment, and removing them reveals skin that looks like it's been marinated in a solution of sweat, cosmetic residue, and whatever chemical compounds have been evaporating from the various fabrics and cleaning products. The washing water, which was questionable yesterday evening, has now had all night to develop new characteristics, including a surface film that has achieved structural integrity and a smell that suggests active decomposition of organic materials. Using this water for morning cleaning seems like it might create more problems than it solves, but the alternative is beginning the day's elaborate preparation routine while still covered in the night's accumulation of atmospheric contamination. Commander Strutt greets the dawn by beginning his morning territorial display, which involves making sounds that suggest he's either celebrating the arrival of another day or expressing his dissatisfaction with the general state of everything around him. The sounds echo through the quarters and wake anyone who might have somehow managed to fall asleep, despite all the other obstacles to rest. Precious Orchid emerges from her quarter looking like someone who's spent the night in active combat with her own digestive system, and the evidence suggests her internal rebellion has reached new levels of creativity overnight. The smell emanating from her general area has evolved beyond anything that should be produced by human biological processes, and her skin has taken on the kind of pallor that suggests serious dehydration or possibly the early stages of something that requires medical attention. Beautiful Moon's fever has broken sometime during the night, but the breaking process has left her looking like she's been through a particularly brutal form of medieval medical treatment, and the smell of infection has intensified to the point where it's creating its own atmospheric zone that makes breathing in her vicinity a conscious effort requiring careful timing and shallow breaths. Elegant Willow's herbal paste experiment has produced results that suggest the cure might be worse than the original problem, and her skin has developed new patterns of irritation that look like someone drew a map of inflammation across her body using infected plant matter as ink. The paste itself has hardened overnight into patches that crack when she moves, releasing small clouds of herbal dust that smell like compost mixed with medicinal alcohol. The silk wall hangings display Commander Strutt's artistic vision in the form of systematic destruction that has turned pastoral scenes into abstract representations of chaos, and the torn fabric hangs in strips that move with every air current, while releasing small showers of silk threads that settle on everything like expensive snow that smells like bird. Your sleeping area reveals the night's accumulation of moisture, debris, and various biological byproducts and patterns that tell the story of a night spent trying to achieve rest in conditions designed to prevent it. The sleeping mat has absorbed enough liquid to achieve saturation, and pressing on any part of it produces squelching sounds and releases odors that suggest the batting has begun to ferment. The morning routine must begin despite the fact that everyone looks and smells like they've spent the night in a particularly unsuccessful attempt at medieval camping, and the day's preparation requirements will somehow have to transform this collection of exhausted, contaminated, and variously afflicted women into a group that appears ready to serve as decorative elements in the imperial court. The head eunuch arrives for morning inspection and is visibly appalled by the general state of deteriorate through the kind of theatrical sigation that has occurred overnight. But his disapproval is expressing and note-taking that suggests this level of degradation is both unexpected and somehow personally offensive to his professional standards for concubine maintenance. Commander Strutt positions himself where he can observe the morning preparations while continuing his campaign of systematic property destruction, and his presence guarantees that today will bring more of the same peacock-related complications that made yesterday such a memorable exercise in endurance. tolerance, and the gradual erosion of any illusions about the glamorous nature of imperial concubine life. And so begins another day in your exciting career as a living decoration in the Chinese imperial court, where every morning brings fresh opportunities to discover new forms of discomfort while maintaining the appearance of grateful participation in what's supposed to be the ultimate privilege for a woman of your social class. Congratulations, you're living the dream. The dream that turns out to involve significantly more bodily fluids, territorial birds, and systematic physical discomfort than the recruitment literature mentioned. The morning preparation ritual begins with the realization that yesterday's cosmetic supplies have developed their own ecosystem overnight, and the lead-based face powder has absorbed enough moisture from the air to achieve the consistency of wet cement mixed with toxic waste. The rouge made from crushed insects has separated into layers, with an oily film on top and a sediment at the bottom that looks like dried blood mixed with bug parts. Your skin, after spending the night marinating in the accumulated residue from yesterday's cosmetic applications, has developed a texture that feels like it's been lightly sanded with materials that weren't designed for human contact. The areas where the heaviest makeup was applied have developed a burning sensation that suggests chemical reactions are continuing to occur even after the products have been partially removed. The hair preparation process reveals that the pomade used to hold yesterday's elaborate styles has achieved a permanent bond with your hair follicles, and removal requires scraping with metal combs that feel like someone decided to perform surgery on your scalp using instruments designed for grooming horses. Each stroke produces debris that looks like a mixture of hair, dried scalp oil, and whatever organic compounds were used to create the styling products. Commander Strut has appointed himself supervisor of the morning beauty routine, and he expresses his opinions about the process by making critical honking sounds every time someone applies makeup or attempts to style their hair. His commentary creates a running soundtrack of disapproval that makes the already unpleasant preparation process feel like a performance being reviewed by a particularly harsh critic with anger management issues. The morning meal arrives looking like it's been prepared by someone who learned cooking from a manual written by people who had only heard descriptions of food but had never actually seen or tasted any. The rice porridge has achieved a consistency that suggests it's been mixed with something that might be intended as adhesive, and the preserved vegetables have developed colors that don't occur naturally in any plant known to botanical science. Precious Orchid attempts to participate in the morning meal, but her digestive system immediately announces its continued rebellion with sounds that suggest internal warfare has reached a new level of intensity. She retreats to her corner while making apologetic gestures, but the damage to the morning's atmosphere has already been accomplished, and everyone else loses their appetite while pretending not to notice the ongoing biological catastrophe happening in their shared living space. The clothing for today's activities has been selected by someone who apparently believes that yesterday's level of physical discomfort was insufficient and needs to be enhanced through the use of fabrics that have been treated with substances that make them simultaneously stiff and clingy. The undergarments feel like they've been woven from materials that were designed for industrial applications rather than human contact, and putting them on creates immediate friction points that promise to become serious problems as the day progresses. Your morning shoes have been replaced with a new pair that are even smaller than yesterday's, because apparently the goal is to gradually compress your feet into shapes that more closely resemble the tiny decorative objects that imperial aesthetics consider ideal for female appendages. The new shoes create immediate pressure points in places where yesterday's shoes hadn't yet reached, promising a day of discovering new forms of foot-related agony. Beautiful Moon's tooth infection has entered a new phase overnight, and the swelling has progressed to the point where the left side of her face looks like it belongs to a different person. The smell of infection has intensified and evolved, creating an aroma that suggests something organic is actively decomposing inside her head, while she tries to maintain the appearance of imperial beauty and grace. The makeup application process begins with the discovery that your skin has developed an allergic reaction to one or more of the cosmetic ingredients, and applying fresh makeup over the irritated areas creates a burning sensation that suggests you're essentially painting your face with materials that your body recognizes as hostile, foreign substances. The lead-based powder goes on unevenly over the inflamed areas, creating a patchy effect that looks like someone tried to whitewash a wall that was already peeling. Elegant Willow's herbal paste experiment has produced overnight developments that suggest the cure is definitely worse than the original problem, and her skin has developed new patterns of inflammation that look like someone used infected plant matter to create abstract art across her body. The paste has hardened into crusty patches that crack and flake when she moves, releasing small clouds of herbal debris that make everyone nearby sneeze while breathing in particles of her medical treatment. Commander Strut has discovered that the morning makeup supplies make excellent materials for artistic expression, and he begins incorporating various cosmetic products into his territorial marking routine. The result is an abstract installation of peacock footprints, rendered in rouge and face powder, creating patterns across the floor that would be interesting if they weren't, also completely destroying the expensive cosmetics everyone needs for their daily transformation into imperial eye candy. The morning inspection by the head eunuch reveals that overnight deterioration has reached levels that challenge even his professional ability to create the illusion of imperial beauty from the raw materials at hand. His examination of each concubine involves making small, disapproving sounds while taking notes that suggest he's documenting evidence of systematic failure in the concubine maintenance program. Your hairstyling session begins with the realization that yesterday's pins and combs have created semi-permanent damage to your scalp, and the areas where the heaviest ornaments were attached now have small bald patches where the constant tension has caused hair follicles to give up entirely. The new style requires even more pins and combs, which will be inserted into areas that are already tender from yesterday's architectural assault on your head. The morning courtyard gathering reveals that everyone else is dealing with similar accumulating damage from the daily routine of systematic beautification, and the group now resembles a collection of people who are slowly being destroyed by the requirements of their job while trying to maintain the appearance of grateful participation in imperial privilege. The sun rises over another day in your glamorous life as an imperial concubine, where every morning brings fresh opportunities to discover that yesterday's discomfort was just preparation for today's enhanced version of the same systematic assault on your physical and mental well-being. The air fills with the sounds of cosmetic application, digestive rebellion, peacock commentary, and the general atmospheric chaos that results from 12 women trying to transform themselves into living decorations, while sharing inadequate facilities and dealing with the ongoing challenges of existing in human bodies that weren't designed for this level of ornamental abuse. And this is still just the beginning of your day, with many more hours of standing, sitting, walking, and maintaining perfect posture while your body continues its slow rebellion against every aspect of the imperial beauty and deportment standards that define your existence as a decorative human being in service to an emperor who doesn't care about the biological realities and maintaining the illusion that you're a living work of art rather than a person with digestive systems, skin that reacts to toxic cosmetics, and feet that weren't designed to be compressed into tiny shoes for 14 hours at a time. Tomorrow brings the morning bathing ritual, which sounds refreshing until you realize that the imperial bathing pools are filled with water that's been sitting since yesterday and has developed a thin film on the surface that looks like someone mixed soap with dead skin cells and whatever oils have been seeping out of the marble. The film breaks apart when you disturb it, creating patterns that drift across the water like greasy clouds, while releasing a smell that suggests the filtration system involves more hope than actual engineering. The bathing attendants arrive with their collection of scrubbing implements that look like they were designed by someone who confused personal hygiene with industrial cleaning processes. The brushes are made from boar bristles that have been stiffened with some kind of resin, creating surfaces that feel like scrubbing yourself with a combination of steel wool and dried tree bark. The soap they provide has been made from animal fat that wasn't particularly fresh when it was converted into cleaning products, and it has the consistency of cold gravy mixed with sand. Commander Strut has followed you to the bathing area because apparently peacocks have opinions about personal hygiene, and he's positioned himself where he can observe the entire process while making judgmental clicking sounds every time someone enters the water. His commentary creates a running soundtrack of disapproval that makes the already unpleasant experience feel like a performance, being reviewed by a critic whose qualifications involve systematic property destruction and aggressive territorial marking. And there you have it, your glamorous day as an Imperial concubine. Commander Strut settles onto his perch for the night, probably dreaming of tomorrow's opportunities for systematic destruction, while you lie on your soggy mattress, listening to Precious, Orchid's digestive system plan its next assault on palace air quality. The silk curtains around your bed still smell like that morning's vomit mixed with peacock musk, and you can feel new blisters forming where your feet finally escaped those decorative torture devices they call shoes. Your skin burns from lead poisoning disguised as beauty treatments, and somewhere in the distance, beautiful Loon whimpers softly as her tooth infection continues its slow march toward her brain. So next time someone tells you about the romance and luxury of ancient palace life, you can smile with your chemically damaged lips and remember that behind every silk curtain was a woman slowly being poisoned by her own makeup while a territorial bird systematically destroyed everything she owned. Sweet dreams and sleep tight, knowing that at least your pillow doesn't squelch when you put your head down.